Hi, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Evolvers. I'm Elizabeth Andes Bell, and today I'm delighted to introduce you to Chris Newell. Chris, hi, Chris.
Elizabeth.
Chris is in Australia. He is Canadian born originally, and he immigrated to Western Australia in '74. He's a horticultural scientist, and he began studying yoga and meditation in the '70s. He's a student of Buddhism, and he's a martial artist. And he also, for over a decade, has been teaching yoga, martial arts, and personal training. And what we're going to talk about today really is around how movement education and movement arts and martial arts are really evolving. And Chris is one of the leaders in that direction. So welcome, Chris. I'm delighted to have you.
Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. That's very generous of you. Thank you.
I gave a very brief introduction of you. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself?
Well, I think context for me is basically, in light of this interview, one of the sort of earliest insights I had into integrating movement into personal, self-actualization is realizing that most of the martial arts in particular, they're good examples, but yoga is a good example too, is basically people get in situations where they're relying on an external source to learn, and you're basically accumulating techniques. So right from the word go, I realized that there has to be something a little bit deeper, and you need to, rather than simply work on the external, you've got to integrate these movement patterns and these into an internal practice. So basically where I'm at now, I would describe what I teach as sort of an inner size. It's sort of a mixture of inner size and exercise, that it's mind body stuff, and it's integral to becoming sort of self-actualized in what you do. You need to take responsibility, and the way to do that is to sort of be able to center yourself over the process of the training activity. So and that's driven my training for 40 years, that realization that we want to get to sort of what's the foundation to what we're doing. And some of it's kind of simple in a way. So I think that people like to have lots of things to do, and that's why there's so many external little things to keep you busy. And commercially and in styles, people, you get locked into grading through, and essentially they want you in the system. They don't want you to leave. So there are reasons for that. But from an individual point of view, for taking responsibility for your own health and vitality, and I'm 68 years old now, and my interest is in what I call high performance aging. It's a term I got from one of my yoga teachers, Denise Rouleau, and it relates to maintaining, your vitality and throughout the course of your whole life, rather than accumulating injuries from you're actually building in sound movement habits and sound mental thinking processes that will support you in your life. So it's really what you do off the mat is another thing that interests me as well, how you apply what you're learning.
No,
so
I don't mean to jump on you. Finish, please.
I was just going to say that's sort of what drives everything I do and how I teach. So, and you have to buy into that, otherwise we can't really work together.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you kind of have just answered the question I was about to ask you, which is, I hear this from a lot of people who, because we're in movement education and we're used to being introspectively aware.
Yes.
But we also have to interface with the public and our clients, and certainly as an ex-owner of health club and yoga studios,
Yeah.
I would face this dilemma all the time because I'd have to make rent every month.
Sure. Oh yeah, there's a commercial imperative. Yeah.
There's a commercial imperative, and the classes that were the most packed classes were the most traditional fitness directed classes.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
the softer programming that asked people to get in touch with their interoceptive awareness that, they didn't, you'd be lucky if you had half a dozen students in class.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that there is this indoctrination, it's certainly in Western culture, to just go for form, go for some kind of perfection of form, and not feel. And it would drive me crazy when I would even just walk into the gym for years, and people would be on the treadmills watching CNN. And I'm thinking they're not in their bodies. And maybe that's a good thing, because what is CNN doing to their nervous systems? And what are they training for, really? How to be more numb to your sympathetic activation. So
well, I guess there's an endorphin kick that comes along with all of that muscle work. But,
there is.
But traditionally, we're faced with the reality of aging, and muscles wear out. You can, and I think traditionally in the internal martial arts styles, anyways, is that or even in probably most Chinese styles, is that there's a recognition that when you're younger, you start off external, and as you age, you transition into internal, and it's not. I guess it kind of represents a wisdom transfer, but you can continue to access the unlimited energy that we're living in until your last breath, but you can't do resistance training in the same way. So your strength has to transition from musculature to internal, and you have to get away from red meat to the fascial lines and that kind of thing, and get energy and strength that way. And that's an internal journey. So there's a a relationship between interoception and proprioception that I find kind of fascinating, as you transition from one to the other. But
we'll save
interoception.
Let's talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But just to get back to where we were with expectations of people.
Yeah.
And meeting their expectations when they come to work with you.
Yes.
I think it's valuable to, what I do with my clients is I teach what I teach, but but I try to frame it within what they've come for and what their expectations are.
Yeah.
And certainly I think you raise a really interesting point about high performance aging, when you talk about how as you get older, it's more natural that you're more interested in slowing down and
correct.
Interoceptive awareness.
Yeah.
And I think that can really be the most regenerative movement experience for people, to find that inner energy and to bring alive the sensations that maybe, before they retired or something, they didn't have time for any of that. So I'm all for that. I think that's a very important piece here. Yeah.
Well, I've got several clients in the millennial group, and they really enjoy interoception.
Yes.
It's just
my daughter is 30 and she adores it. That is her movement meditation.
Correct. Yeah. So when people come, and if you want to work with me, even if you might start with a clear sort of objective goal, muscle toning or something like that. The only way that I know how to teach that is to start by engaging, making sure that you can engage with what your center is. So we start this internal process, whether you're aware of it or not. And it's your ability to kind of work on asking a question, a hypothetical question. What is your reference for moving? And then we answer that question by saying, well, you've got a dynamic center of mass and you've got a center of gravity, and then you've got a mental state that you use as well. But basically, if we explore where those are, it's a natural progression that you will cultivate interoception, because that's the way to find those places, if that's the right term for that.
I mean, I have a friend who says everything is interoception.
Yeah.
Proprioception, exteroception, graviception. It's really just subsets of interoception.
Yeah. Yes. That's probably some truth in that for sure. Yeah. And the only way that I know of, or certainly the easiest way to start with proprioception is, again, another one of my yoga teachers, Christine Weber, is that pause is as important as the pose. It's how you feel, not how you look. And you have to pause. You kind of have to stop in order to reflect on that feeling. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you'll miss it, or it won't manifest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many? That's so refreshing to hear. Because how many yoga classes don't include the idea of a pause until you get to Shavasana?
Correct. Yeah. And then Shavasana is like obligatory. You don't have a choice. What fascinates me. And so we do a lot of standing Shavasana, which is a sort of, I guess, a hybrid with the standing meditation, but basically same thing, but different, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And in the yoga poses that you give people, are they finding their way organically through some nonlinear movement to then arrive at a pose? Are you guiding them, or how does that look?
Well, I work on basically, like I mentioned, your center. We work on a feeling that you're moving away from your center. So you're moving away from your center. You're not moving to the edge of anything. That's not the way it works. So there's no going deeper or letting go or anything like that. It's all about moving away from your center. So we start with simple exercises, plank, lunges, squats, and then work through variations on them. And it's being able to activate your whole body and stabilize yourself. And then we move into gentle movements. And if we have a picture, say, of Trikonasana or Virabhadrasana too, that's the picture. That's the picture. It's not necessarily the way you have to look, but we're going to end up, there's a difference between Virabhadrasana 2 and Trikonasana. So, but you move into that posture from your center, and your range of movement your control over your range of movement will improve over time. So it's a progression. So it's not so much linear, although, excuse me, in my martial arts, in my Zhongjin Dao, we do get a little bit OCD about cardinal points, and the fact that again, you've got a center, so you've got a reference point in your body that's sort of a Cartesian axis, 0, 0, 0. So you've got your sagittal plane, vertical plane, horizontal plane, and you've got cardinal points that you're referring to. So if you're going forward, you go forward. You don't go sideways. You go forward. It's a different feeling, and we practice recognizing those. And each person will work their way to that in their own way, in their own time. But the progress is characterized by stability and strength, or strength in the posture. If and your ability to soften back to your center,
Yeah.
to pull back, to
I
pull
love
back.
this softening back to center. I have a background in Laban Bartuniev movement studies.
Yeah, not familiar with that.
Well, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But Rudolf Laban was a movement analyst in Germany in the 30s, and he was actually hired to help systematize conveyor belt movements of work factory workers. But that was from that kind of a beginning. Then he came to America after, because of the war, and he developed the practice that he developed, this a way of looking at movement in 3 dimensions, became highly developed. And then he started working with a woman, Irmgard Bartuniev, who brought in the effort and the way that we shape this organism of ourselves as we move in 3 dimensions and in three planes.
Nice.
And, so long story short, I used to teach aerobics classes back in the early 80s at the
Jane Fonda,
96th
let's
Street
go.
Y, yes, in New York City. And we taught in this great big gym. The whole class was built around Laban Bartuniev movement fundamentals. So I choreographed these dances. And you would be reaching to the diagonals, high diagonal to front, to the opposite low diagonal back, horizontal, sagittal, vertical. And so my point is that every dimension of movement is rich with a different feeling. Correct. Yeah. That's really the interesting thing, that's kind of encoded in these, they're like shades of emotion included in space. And filling up the space or retreating from the space was a really interesting movement experience for a lot of people. And one of the things, because I was in New York City, and a lot of these people are doctors and lawyers, and they're on a real narrow professional track. Well, sagittal movement, moving forward, was all they really knew how to do. I decided, forget about it. Figure 8 movement. But once they got it, they would start giggling and skipping, and they were so free.
Well, I think that's part of the background to what I call my business, I suppose. Circle work training is basically engaging in circles. So if somebody wants to do strength and condition training with me, we get straight out of the linear and go to circumduction and play with that. And then recognize how that reflects back onto your core. Speaking of moving that way, and that's a whole other feeling. So and again, to capitalize on that, you throw in a big dose of interoception as well. That helps.
You mentioned the word play, and I know that you talked about that in circle work and this high performance aging part of it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I love this whole coming back to play.
Yeah, it seems to be a kind of a default position. Part of it, I think, is an inability to concentrate, and that's okay. So you just lose the focus. But I think you need to be free to explore the limits, whatever limits you are, whatever limits you have. You need to be aware of what they are. And if you do that safely, it can be fun and it can be creative, and you certainly get out of the repetitive strain type training. For me, I I mean, I encourage that every time we go, we're spinning hands or doing some martial drill like that. We try our hardest to stay on task. But the first thing that happens is we start playing around, and then you have to stop and come back. So that whole process of letting yourself go to play and then coming back to what the form is quite a useful exercise in and of itself to help you recognize the difference between play and application. So
That's very interesting.
Sometimes if I can be a bit serious. So if you're focused on trying to learn something, playing isn't probably the best strategy to learn it. But once you think you've learned it or you're learning it, playing with it is a good way to test the model. Is a really good way to test the model. And that in and of itself is an excellent way to learn, because in my martial arts, Zhongjin Dao Yu Chuan, it kind of really only works if you set the conditions up. So the process of I have this idea of teaching, there are all these default sets that you want to train yourself to end up. When you're not doing anything, you've defaulted back to a upright posture, that upright good posture, and your breath is normalized and everything's cool. So once you get outside the limits, you have to recognize that you're outside the limits. So it's not going to detect the process may not work. Say if you're with a partner, so you have to readjust. You have to learn to readjust, to reset up the conditions so that then you can take advantage of what you do know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I guess is that if somebody is having a little bit of difficulty when you're working on the specific thing and you let it go to play.
Yeah.
And then you come back to it after that whatever it was, maybe the person just wasn't focused, or they were nervous or tense or something, but then they have a new approach. Yeah. That's right. And also you come up with, you have fun and you come up with new ideas, right?
How creative is that? Yeah. Hang on.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and I suppose it's if you're a fixed mentality, might be hard, but if you're, if you don't want change, if you want things always the same, but.
Well, maybe they're just not coming to your classes.
No, I don't. No, just thinking how, external styles are often not that playful, are they?
No,
you have to do what you're told.
You do. Yeah. Boy, you do. And you have to have the right line, and you have to be on time, and all those things. And it really is so old school, old millennium. Now that what we know about fascia and how the energy moves through the body in the most fluid and functional form for our own longevity and performance, really.
Yeah.
The training methods of the past fly in the face of what we know that fascia doesn't like, such as repetitive movement. Strains from repetitive movements causing injuries, and also there's now neurological evidence that if you keep doing things the same way all the time, it builds these little canals in your brain and tamps down your innovative thinking. Yeah. And we need, if there's anything we need now, is to be able to adapt to changing circumstances and come up with fresh ideas about how to be more resilient.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And one of the ways to be resilient is to have a strong center that you can move from. You've always got a safe place to go.
A moving.
You've always got You've always got a safe place to go. So there's, and if you learn basic movement patterns and you know the difference between, using your joints correctly, so you're not going to do RSI or have some
Say
of
what
these things,
RSI is.
repetitive strain injury.
Because I'm just thinking there'd be some people watching this who won't.
Oh, yeah. So repetitive strain injury. So basically doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again isn't really good in the long run without some variation. And then the other thing is some of this stuff, there's so much force at the joints. It's like, wow, it's just not good. So in the long run, in my opinion. So really gets in the way. It actually really, really, really gets in the way. That your muscles really get in the way, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
also,
they do.
I want to bring up something else that you talked about in terms of the finding your center.
Yeah.
And even that idea of what is center is something that I think needs to be readdressed as, there's this idea, some people have this idea, for maybe they've had ballet training or something, that center is something that you hold onto, and there is this sense of rigidity around holding center. And so I just want to say, I'm guessing that what you're really talking about in finding center is finding that moving center, and being able to track those changes so that you have strength with mobility.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But fluid within range.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're not out there all over the place, but there's still this felt locale of my center.
You are connected.
Yeah.
So we're aiming to do whole body movement. We want our hand to be connected to our core, to be connected to our foot, and we want our foot to be connected to our hand.
Yeah.
And we want to get that fluidity and that strength from the whole body movement. We want to be able to recruit the whole fascial system into what we're doing. And part of the martial art that I practice is this idea that change is fundamental. Nothing stays the same. But if you want to sort of maintain your focus, you can learn how to change with the change. So there's a relativity of staying the same, but you're adapting and you're accommodating change as it occurs. So you're not anticipating necessarily this is going to happen, and you're not reacting, oh, that just happened, so I better do this. You're not playing catch up. You're actually in the moment.
Yeah.
And you're connected to the moment. And as everything changes, you're staying kind of neutral at that point. So that's one thing I haven't mentioned. This idea of being neutral is key to how I teach as well. So, and it links back to the idea of having a center. So the idea of neutral is, can you recognize where the balance point is? Where are you in relationship to the balance point? So if you take a look at the yin yang symbol, and we have those, and we talk in terms of those kind of energies, there's a transition from one to the other. And if you can find that balance point, then you have the option. You can go yin or you can go yang. You can do two things. You've got two options. But if you're committed, if you're double weighted and you've gone over yang or you've gone yin, you don't have anywhere to go other than the other way, if you know what I mean.
So do you have any techniques that you use with people besides the yin yang symbol to help them find how to be in neutral, how to be just simply present and available for whatever arises?
Yeah, I work on the idea we have mental, physical. So I can show you things on a physical level that are metaphors for what happens on a mental level. On a mental level, if you're in a balanced homeostatic parasympathetic nervous system state, your character, the qualities of your mind will be calm. And that's how you can tell. Physically, we start almost every practice, we start in sort of like an open tadasana, or an open standing state. And we spend a lot of time connecting our foot to core, activating our lower legs and the soles of our feet. And we do this exercise where we rock forward and backwards, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. And you transition through a neutral point. That's the first neutral point I teach people. You transition through a neutral point. And so that's the symbol of what we're looking for. We're looking for, I don't know necessarily where they are, but I know what they feel like based on body tension. And I can demonstrate them in some instances. So your cardinal points are neutral points. So as you go to the horizontal, we've got vertical, so you're going vertical, but as you go to the horizontal, if you go away from your body, you're going away from your body to the horizontal, and then it transitions, you're coming back to the middle line as you come to the upper half of the circle. So that cardinal point out there, that's kind of a neutral point as well, because you've got that choice. I can go up or down. Or sorry, I can go in or out, pardon me, in that instance. So back to the rocking one, because that's the best one. That ties back into learning critical sensations around balance. And when you rock forward, you can activate your back line. And when you rock backwards, you can activate your deep front line. So you can get access to a whole bunch of sensations simply by a simple exercise of rocking. So that's how I introduce neutral. Generally, I start on the body, and then encourage clients and students to reflect on their mind state throughout the day. And we can normally induce a calm mind through interoceptive practice and just simple breathing exercises as well.
There's something that you just said that I'm just curious about. I'm wondering if you have a special way of doing this. Because usually when we rock forward, we're activating the front line. And when we rock back, we're loading the back line.
Yeah.
And those can be unconscious postural patterns, or, not necessarily unconscious, but preferred patterns that they become habitual. And so, so like you could, and when you rock forward, if somebody kind of lives in that forward position, very often the spine is extended, the breath isn't deep.
Yeah.
And there's a sympathetic activation under that. Yeah. And then with the back line, what I notice when somebody is sitting back, it can go either way, but they can start to go into a collapse, or they can just, hold it in a kind of very rigid way. So, so if I understand what you said, you're using rocking forward to activate the flow down the back line, and
up
rocking
the back line,
back.
up the back line, up the back
So
line.
So you're back and down the foot.
Yeah.
And just
no.
up the back.
Yeah, it's either up the back or up the front. So that these fascia lines don't work independently. So but you can isolate the feeling. So the idea that I try and get people is that as you're rocking forward, your back line is trying to pull you back up. And it'll start at the calves and it'll come all the way up. It'll come up your hamstrings and up past your glutes, and by the time it gets into your torso, you're going to lose your balance. You've gone too far. So you've separated your alignment, your center of mass and your center of gravity have separated, and you'll fall. When you go backwards, it's a slightly different feeling because you don't have your toes to help you, and you tend to roll over. But it's the same thing. The feeling will, the front line's trying to pull you. You want to try and feel that the front line is pulling you back up. And
so you're talking about going back.
Yeah, and feel how your front line
the front line then is like your guardrail, and there's
pulling you back to vertical,
pulling you back to vertical.
Yeah,
I'm doing it in my chair. I wish I was standing.
Yeah.
So what I feel is when I go back on my sit bones, I feel a sensation of, from my feet up to my abdominal area, this lifting. It's
correct.
like a writing reflex almost. Is this what you're
correct?
Okay.
That's what I encourage people to feel.
Interesting. Okay. I just had to get clear with that, because it's a little bit different terminology than I use, but I understand now. But okay, great.
And it's quite subtle, but again, by virtue of the process of going through it and over and over and over and over again, I mean, people understand it intellectually and they can feel it in the end, and then that connects right into all sorts of balance exercises as well, and then you can so your feet are parallel, and then you can step forward into a short stance, and then do the same again and feel the difference, and then play with the angles again, and you can feel how your body gets activated to hold itself upright. And those feelings are integral then to when you're moving. If you feel like you're losing your balance, well, you don't really feel it, it just happens. But basically, that deep training should reflect on improved balance. Well, I know it will. It will reflect in improved balance, and it's something you don't have to think about. So it's kind of like the nervous system gets deep trained, really deep trained, and similar to if you practice jujitsu or I guess judo or aikido, and you learn how to break fall, you learn how to be thrown on the mat.
Let me just ask you a question about that, because you're getting into an area that I wanted to ask you about anyway, which is you were telling me about your martial arts practice, that there's this way that you help them to you don't have to touch them, that you can sort of go underneath their energy and knock them off balance. Am I getting that right?
I was mentioning how when you make contact, and it can be very light or it can be substantive, but it's a training drill more than anything, because in real life dynamics, nothing sort of works out quite so cleanly. But in a training drill with a partner, both people are involved. So your partner has to feed you the right kind of energy so that the dynamic person can get it. But the object of the exercise at the point of contact, I want to be able to sink my mass and float it up underneath your mass. And by doing that, then you only have to be shifted a centimeter and you've lost your balance if you're not compensating. So that's how we demonstrate that. A normal person would sink their mass back or adjust as the energy comes in. But the drill is, I'd want to practice to touch you, and I'm not even going through your kinetic chain, like through your bones. I'm going through your fascia, ideally, and connecting to your fascia, and then sinking underneath, and then expanding and lifting you off your feet.
I bet that blows people's minds when that happens to them, or when
it's an it's it's an interesting feeling. People have to be able to feed you the right energy,
Yeah.
and then they can do it back. And then they can do it back to you as
Yeah.
well. So it doesn't take. But
It kind of reminds me a little bit of this exercise, this party trick that we used to do in my kids' slumber parties.
okay,
Light
that'd
as
be
a
about
feather.
right.
Light as a feather. You'd sit in a chair, one
Yeah.
person in a chair, and then 5 or 6 kids around them, and they're holding the chair with 2 fingers, the bottom
Yeah.
of the chair, and they go light as a feather, light as a feather, light as a
Yes.
feather.
Yeah. Mhm,
And then
mhm.
before you know it, no effort, you're lifting the person and the chair right up in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now those
So,
those are
that's really
paradigm busters.
Pardon me.
They're paradigm busters, is
Oh
what,
yeah,
you know.
and there you have. Um, Technically, everybody has access to that, and people who don't have training sort of can access it more easily sometimes. Whether they can demonstrate it in a range of situations is another thing. But so there you have the children around the chair, and they're all relaxing. Light as a feather, light as a feather, light as a feather. That's the message that's going through to the brain. So the muscles are turning off, and the muscles are just dropping, and the muscles are letting go, and then suddenly the chair is floating off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what
It's
happens. It's great.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you this, because this has been a wonderful talk, and I just want to close it with one final question for you, which is, they have these experiences, so the light as a feather kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
It is changing how they move, how they perceive, how they feel inside themselves. Do you have people telling you, coming back to you saying, what's going on? Or, hey, I just realized I don't have to do it this way anymore. Is it starting to bleed through, be integrated into how people live, how they see who they are within the culture, the cultural paradigm?
I believe so. I don't make any claims to teach anything that's sort of, how can I put it? I guess it's transformative, but it's very subtle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, you can't say, I will give you this result,
Yeah.
this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not, I run away when somebody says that to me.
Yeah.
Because it's such an individual thing. I'm just really asking more out of curiosity about, how does this kind of experience filter down and integrate or connect to other kinds of experiences? Maybe nobody has said any of that to you. Maybe that's for, some chance conversation that comes up with a longtime student or something, I'm just curious if you had any.
No, most people, the people that I train, I encourage them to be able to turn on that body state during the day, and they get the benefit of a calm mind and a relaxed situation, and they reset, and everybody says that they're able to do that.
Well, that's it, Chris.
That's it. Yeah. So
there it is.
There
That's
it is.
huge.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily what we do on the mat, but it's their ability to, when they're in a meeting, when they're with a friend, when they're whatever, you can induce a state of calm and be centered.
Beautiful.
And make better decisions. Be supportive of the community. Be supportive in your relationships. Be supportive of yourself, right? So yeah, be nice to yourself, and that's all. It's just a process, and it's lifelong. So it just keeps going on and on and on and on and on and on.
Well, we know what I think is so interesting about this. We're talking about resourcing, and you talk to a trauma therapist, and they bring up a very good point about how we need to be co-regulated in order to then self-regulate. As a baby, an infant needs that co-regulation experience before they can bridge into regulation. And certainly we all need that when we're in a trauma activated place.
Yeah.
But these self-regulation skills, to be able to build upon our abilities to resource those skills within ourselves, I think is a game changer in how we're going to change culture and become a kinder, more empathic culture.
Yes. Yeah.
And in addition to the fact that you're teaching them interoceptive skills, which is building empathy.
Yeah.
Then also to get to use these throughout their day.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It is, I think. And I mentioned earlier, an underlying question that we use to drive the practice is, what's your reference point for moving? And then we got into that conversation about your center. Another set of questions that I pose is, how are you connected and how do you feel? Can you reflect on that?
Nice.
And if you don't feel comfortable, you have to make some changes so that you do. So go back to neutral. So, okay. So, and in a physical sense, you can sort of, like I mentioned earlier about how electron works there's a range and if you get outside that, then the principles don't really apply in a way. So you need to make an adjustment. So that's an example of how am I connected? How do I feel? I don't feel comfortable. I have to make a slight adjustment there. I'm back on. I've got my lines back sorted out. So I'm back in a strong position. Same thing psychologically.
Oh, sure.
Same thing. Absolutely same thing psychologically. So at work, I encourage team members to recognize how, if you're having a conversation with management, and how do you feel about that? I mean, you've got to don't lose your center when you're in that middle of that conversation.
Right. The skill of feeling myself. Feeling myself while I'm feeling you as well. That seamless continuity in communication.
Correct.
This is taking this idea this fascia idea of continuity and building these bridges in community, which is really the ways, all the billions of unique little ways that things will start to shift and morph. Chris, this has been really wonderful talking to you. I want to thank you so much. And anyone who wants to get in touch with Chris, we're going to have his contact information at the bottom of this video. So you're welcome to reach out to him. I'm sure that he will be happy to get back to you.
Definitely. And so thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's been great to talk to you and get to know you better.
Likewise.
Likewise.
Okay. Thank you so much.